Thomas, your pick.
I'm going to go with question 4, of course.
Okay. Question 4. Americans owe nearly $1.3 trillion in student loan debt. What steps should Congress take to help those struggling to repay student loans?
Well, because education is not really in our Constitution, I don't believe that Congress gets involved enough in what's going on with our education system. I believe that we do have the capabilities of helping our students out at the college level. That's why I believe that we should have some type of form of free tuition for colleges. For students that excel in their freshman and sophomore year. I believe we can give them their junior and their senior year tuition free. Now, when we start talking about these type of issues with that and Medicare for all, people call you a socialist and they believe that where are you going to get the money from? And I believe that we have to hold our federal agencies accountable for the money they do receive, such as, let's say the Overseas Contingency Fund. This is a fund since 2003. $64 billion has been put in this fund and no accountability, no paper trail. And if you add that up from then to now, you're talking about $1.6 trillion that could have went to education, also for Medicare for all. So I believe that the children are our future and we got to invest in what our future is. So I suggest that we take some of them funds that's being wasted in our federal agencies and divert that to our education system.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Mr. Anderson.
Yes. Why don't we go for national security, Q2, please?
Question 2. Should Congress impose sanctions against Saudi Arabia over the case of missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi?
Topical question. That's a good one. As you probably know, in the news today, the $100 million payment from Saudi Arabia just came over into our coffers. This one is probably a matter of not having all of the facts, but I do believe the United States should strive to be, as we once were, which is a world leader in human rights. And I think that has fallen by the wayside under this administration. We may be stronger national security-wise, but I think we are in danger of losing the mantle of the beacon of freedom that we used to be. I saw a chart a couple weeks ago where we've dropped to 21st in world democracies. We are no longer the freest country in the world. So should Congress impose, I'll answer yes. That's the short version before I get all political and long-winded. Too late. Yeah, I do believe that we should hold countries accountable and, horribly torturing this journalist, as was reported to happen. There have to be repercussions on the international stage. I believe that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Andrus?
Yeah, I think I'm going to regret this, but I'm going to go potpourri question 1.
Question 1. And it's the daily double. Okay, so everybody gets a shot at this one. What is the one policy issue you would immediately work with members of the opposite party on?
Well, we kind of already covered that, the I-10 corridor, infrastructure. Yeah, you got me on the spot here. My main policy issue is the deficit. We have got to find ways to cut spending. The deficit is just ballooning. It's going to affect us all. It's going to affect us all very badly. The Fed's raising the interest rates. That means that the interest on the debt is going up. We have a very serious problem, so we need to figure out ways that we're going to cut. And we're going to have to cut across the board, or we're going to have to make some hard decisions. Social Security, military, somewhere along the way, we're going to have to make some hard decisions and get the debt down.
Same question, 1 minute. Mr. Guillory.
We have got to balance the federal budget. I completely agree. Our national debt is exceeding $21 trillion. I have children. I have 3 children. Everyone in this room either has children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews. You care about our country. I care about our country. What country do we want to hand to them? It can't be a debt-ridden country. This year alone, we're going to spend roughly $310 billion a year on interest payments alone on our public debt. We don't get a new bridge with that. We don't get new roads. We don't get better education. We have got to get our spending under control. And with all due respect, Congressman, I disagree with you voting to increase our national debt 3 times. On your first vote on any major legislation, you voted to increase our debt specifically over $500 billion. There's nothing conservative and there's nothing fiscally responsible about that.
Thank you, Mr. Guillory. Mr. Higgins?
Well, to work with my colleagues across the aisle, there has to be a willingness for such a relationship to move forward. There's many pieces of bipartisan legislation that we passed in the 115th Congress, and all of them had some commonalities regarding they were sort of non-controversial, and yet we live in a political climate wherein we have witnessed the hard left turn of my colleagues across the aisle and a great deal of obstructionist posturing. So we can wish, that there was a great bipartisan will and trend within Congress, and I'm certainly a participant in that. But there's the reality that there's obstructionism happening in Washington, D.C., and that's unfortunate and tragic. We should all question this as Americans.
Mr. Higgins, you were directly referenced by Mr. Guillory, so you have 1 minute to respond to him if you choose.
Thank you, sir. It's not my nature to respond to attacks like that. I'm subject to many. The office that we've established has been recognized as one of the most conservative offices in Washington, D.C. It's absurd to say otherwise. We have voted to advance the conservative agenda. If we needed to take 80 yards in a field goal, we'll do that. We couldn't get 100 yards in a touchdown. I'm completely endorsed and supported by the most conservative elements in the country. And I voted begrudgingly twice no against my colleagues and contrary to the President's wishes on 2 major appropriations bills. If you understand the way appropriations work, which is a complex mechanism, then it's much easier to grasp how challenging it is when you should have 12 appropriations votes when these are compressed into omnibuses or minibuses. And in deference to my colleague, we'll talk more about it over cold beer.
Ms. Methvin?
And I'd like to be in on that beer thing. It sounds good to me. I think we have seen the conservative agenda is all about serving corporations and billionaires and not about being fiscally responsible. So I want to get that in. The policy issue that I want to immediately work on with members of the opposing party is healthcare. Healthcare is the most critical issue, the kitchen table issue in this district and across the country. People are more afraid to become ill than almost anything else because of the threat of bankruptcy is saddling themselves, their families with incredible debt. There are efforts right now to take away coverage for pre-existing conditions, which is going to be devastating for 40% of the people that live in this district. So I know that bipartisanship can happen because I saw it happen when I worked for Congressman Long. We had 6 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the Louisiana delegation, and they met regularly. They worked together for Louisiana, and that's what I intend to do.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas, same question.
Well, I agree with all my colleagues on everything that they just said, but I'm going to go out and say that we need to work on our trade policies. We got too much outsourcing going on in our country where businesses are leaving the United States and going to other countries because we are not, we're procrastinating too much on what the future is, and we're not bringing the products to the table anymore like we used to. And I do believe that we can make the trade deal with Mexico and Canada a lot better. Well, we can do more things to innovate ingenuity. So I believe outsourcing is one of those things that we can't be polarized on. We have to bring those issues to the table. We have to bring those solutions on the table. We have to answer those questions, and we have to work together so we can see America be on top and on the pedestal that we used to be on. right now, those issues are number one, so we should work on
Thank you,
outsourcing.
Mr. Thomas. Okay, Mr. Anderson.
Okay, well, more so than a policy, it's been referenced, but the dialogue we've had here, what I would like to see more of in Congress, and the first thing I'd want to work on is bipartisanship. It's cooperation, it's statesmanship. Politicians used to work deals to get their agendas done. And now, with the influence of corporate money in politics, everybody has a presupposition that has nothing to do with what they do or don't believe. We were all in the back room together. We all got along famously. And I find it hard to believe that we can't go into the House of Representatives and find a way to work together. So that's my long political answer. The short version, healthcare.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. And we're going to end where we started with Mr. Andrus. You've got 1 minute.
Yeah, just going back to the debt. I think while bipartisanship is absolutely essential for some issues, the tit for tat is kind of built into the system so that some things move forward slowly. But concerning the debt, if we're passing bills that has a lot of pork and corporate welfare, if we're passing military bills that's giving money to Saudi Arabia to refuel to bomb Yemen, it's just not going to happen. We have to say no to those.
Okay, thank you. So we've finished round 2. Once again, remind you that no one's used their rebuttal power yet, so you're keeping your powder dry, but this is your last chance as we begin.
Our rebuttal.
Can we use that to add to a question that was covered by a colleague up here, or must it be a rebuttal?
Yeah, if a question is asked to someone else and you want to weigh in on that question, then you kind of raise your hand and say, I'd like to rebut, and you speak.
I'd like to address the question that Her Honor addressed regarding workforce development.
Okay, let's hear it.
The challenge we face here for workforce development is incredible. It's across the country. For the first time since these things have been measured, there are more jobs available in America than there are unemployed workers. It's quite a reflection that we should consider very seriously. That we have manufacturers in South Louisiana that can't get welders, man. Now, when I went to school, I was born in 1961, in junior high school and before grade school, we learned trades. And gradually as a nation, we have shifted away from the respect of a certificate degree education. And I believe this should be restored. We've gradually forced our youngsters into four-year degrees. I believe federal funds should be leveled out regarding education. There's no reason you can't progress, my friend Ramesh, from a certificate degree in welding to a graduate degree at UL. But let us begin at the certificate degree to fill the workforce challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. Okay, so now we'll begin round 3, and thank you for using that rebuttal, and you broke the ice, so maybe it'll encourage someone else to do that. We are going to return to Congressman Higgins for this next question, so pick a question to begin round 3.
National security, third question.
National security, third question. Do you believe it's necessary to build a wall along the U.S.'s southern border with Mexico?
We have 1,954 miles of border, southern border. 100% of the southern portion of that border is controlled and impacted by criminal cartels. Nothing comes across our southern border criminally without being touched by the cartel. We have about 700 miles of physical barrier right now. I've scouted it all. I've scouted the entire 1,954 mile border. I've talked to the officers and troops on the ground that are actually responsible for securing our sovereignty along our southern border. So what's required is not the Great Wall of China. No one is suggesting that we put a 30-foot wall on top of a 200-foot cliff. The topography of the land determines what's needed. The densities of populations north and south of our sovereign southern border is what determines what is needed and where. We need about 900 miles of improved permanent structure in order to allow the Border Patrol to do its job. What's its job? To detect an illegal crossing. This is where technology comes in. To delay that illegal crossing This is where permanent barriers come in that are very difficult to cross. And anyone that says you can defeat a 30-foot wall with a 40-foot ladder has never climbed a 30-foot wall with a 40-foot ladder. It's quite challenging, will certainly delay a criminal crossing. The next part of the Border Patrol's mission is to respond. You detect the illegal crossing, you delay the illegal crossing, and you respond to the illegal crossing. This is where manpower, vehicles, all-weather roads, etc. are called for. So I support giving our law enforcement agencies everything they need to complete their job and restore sovereignty to the borders of our nation.
Thank you. Mr. Higgins?
I'd like to rebuttal.
Okay.
I disagree. I was in San Diego, I was United States Navy, and I've seen tunnels being built while the wall is being built and while fences are being built. So they're professional tunnel diggers over there, and they buy houses just to dig tunnels, just to come over to America. I believe that we have to get better relationship with Mexico, and we have to understand that our infrastructure is in a situation right now where we could come up with a national plan, a national workforce that actually helps our infrastructure and build our infrastructure from coast to coast. And I believe that we can make, we can incorporate immigrants with Americans to actually get all this work done that we have done, that we need to get done in our country. So I believe that the immigrants are actually a blessing in disguise in some type of ways. We can't put Americans second when it comes to that issue, but we can incorporate a workforce plan that makes it, so we're not wasting money on immigration, we can actually make money from immigration.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Attorney, next question to Ms. Methvin.
Potpourri, question 2.
Okay. Should the U.S. move closer to a single-payer, government-managed health care or further away?
I advocate the United States developing a Medicare for All system because we are paying $50 trillion, going to pay $50 trillion for health care in the United States over the next 10 years, which is about twice as much per person as any other wealthy country in the world pays. We have far worse outcomes than other countries. We have a lower life expectancy. We have sky-high rates of maternal and infant mortality, higher rates of diabetes, high blood pressure. We are not getting our money's worth out of the system. And two things that we know: we're paying a tremendous amount of money in administrative fees that could be avoided if we had a single payer system. And we're paying a tremendous amount for our prescription drug medications because our Congress and this administration has blocked the ability of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid to negotiate with prescription drug companies to get down the cost of prescriptions. If we move to a single payer system in the next 10 years, we will be paying approximately $40 trillion for that care, so we would save $10 trillion. We're paying already for Medicare, Medicaid, veterans care, and in our premiums, our deductibles, our co-pays, we're paying a huge amount of money. And this is creating incredible suffering for people in the United States. So the first thing we need to do is undo the sabotage that's been done to the ACA during this administration and make sure that people with pre-existing conditions do not lose their coverage. And then the next thing we have to do is to start working towards a healthcare plan that works for everyone, that gives everyone coverage.
Thank you, Ms. Methvin. Okay, Rebecca. Mr. Guillory.
The answer to this question is not to increase the size, scope, and power of the federal government. One solution is to increase the power of the private sector. You know, right now we have 50 sovereign states, and there's no reason why we talk about a wall right now. Okay, well, we need to tear down these walls around each of our 50 states in healthcare. There's no reason, if you have a plan in Minnesota that's better for your family or better for yourself, that you shouldn't have access to. We need to partner with each individual 50 departments of insurance and find a way. Better access is with the private sector, not the federal government. If I had to put my faith in the hands of the federal government or the private sector, I'll put my hands in faith in the hands of the private sector any day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Thomas. Your question.
Okay, I'm gonna also go for potpourri. I'm gonna go with question number 5.
Question 5. How important is political experience to representing the 3rd Congressional District? What experience do you bring that separates you from the field?
Well, I believe that when you look at the experience and you look at the problems that we're having today, the experienced ones are the ones that have us in this predicament that we're in. And right now, I believe that the leadership for District 3 is maliciously harmful to the progress and proficiency that we desire as a state. I was in the Navy, and I excelled in the Navy. I did radar, tactical data systems, and I was secret control clerk for my command, and I've seen a lot. And I believe that Louisiana's going through growing pains that I've seen before. So I believe that my experience in the Navy, my experience in, I've seen some things that California's going through, like with the medical marijuana situation, that I see Louisiana just getting to. So I believe from my experience, I can bring some of that to the table, and I can also give some information on what I've seen in the past, and I can help Louisiana get through its growing pains and meet the future where it stands, because I believe that situations like the marijuana crop should be legalized throughout the state, because we're a crop state, and marijuana is #1 in the country. So I believe we move marijuana up on a list. I believe as a crop state, I believe that we can see a lot of progress and proficiency that we need to advance into the state that we need to be in. Louisiana can be the blueprint for the rest of the states that's going our direction. We don't have to be number 51. We do have the capabilities to rise up out of the abyss and be the best state in the nation.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Okay, we go to you, Mr. Anderson. Which one was your line?
Dozing off there, sorry. I didn't mean that as a rebuke. It's hard to stand up here stiff. Education and workforce. Second question, please.
Question 2. If elected, how will you work to ensure that post-secondary education is affordable to all who need it?
That's a darn good question. That is a darn good question. And a couple of my colleagues have touched upon it. That I came from the working class. I am one who has worked in the trades for the last 20 years or so. Before that, I did some IT and stuff. So I do put high value on my fellow workers who do the welding, who do the pipe fitting, who do the plumbing. And sometimes just a 2-year degree or a certificate is all that's required. And then once you get into those fields, there's nothing stopping you from getting further education. But yes, I do believe that we should put an emphasis on not just K through 12, but K through 14, at least the first 2 years post-secondary, especially in the modern world where your biggest corporations are Google and Facebook. And we need a lot more technical skills in the STEM fields. We need more students. Both of my kids went engineering, thank goodness. They didn't want to be broke like Dad. So how would I work it? Well, you got to get bipartisan support, as anything. We have to make sure all of Congress agrees, or at least the majority of the vote, that it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's an American issue. We need our kids better education. Right now, we have a crippling student debt problem, so which is turning people off from higher education because you get a 4-year degree in psychology and then you work. You know, I hear Starbucks pays well, but it's still not what they went to school for. So I